All right, welcome everyone for another Whispers of Wisdom, our community conversation on all things spiritual topics. I'm joined with Shantel Ochoa today for a part two on our soul contracts conversation, and I'm excited because I wasn't included on the first conversation, so now I get to come in and share my perspectives, and we're going to dive into some personal stories about how soul contracts and that idea has impacted our lives. So, welcome, Chantel.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm just burning some Palo over here, getting my mind into this conversation. Um, so I'm excited about this one too, and the fact that you and I get to jump on this conversation since Izzy and I did it last time. This is going to be really, it's just so informational, and this morning I got up and just so everyone knows, Soul Contracts is based off of this book, Sacred Contracts by Carolyn Miss. And so I'm just showing that because that's where this really does come from. She does a really beautiful job at putting it down on paper and explaining what it's all about. But it's our soul contracts, right? So this has been with us since our birth, since the beginning of time, all of it. But the way that it is taught is just so profound because when you understand it, it really has a strong impact on your life. Today, jumping on and talking about how soul contracts show up in our life, how we can map them, recognize them, and see the bigger picture.
And I love that this is our part two. This is like an expansion of, and so I'm excited. I'm getting ready. I'm drinking my coffee this morning. It's decaf, but that's exactly all I can handle.
I got myself a big old mug of coffee this morning. My mind's been going for a couple hours already, so I'm like, yeah, just fill it up. I might as well have brought
Yeah.
the pot in with me.
And yeah, just drinking my mushroom coffee with a little decaf and sent my son off this morning. Got him. I didn't get him off to the airport like I was planning on getting him off to the airport, but he jumped on a plane down to Arizona for a 1 week trial internship, and he's so adulting. He's 18 and he's adulting, and I'm like, I'm gonna miss you. You need to call me.
It's crazy when they start. Yeah, my daughter is moving to Arizona on Wednesday.
Yeah, transitions, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking about it. My sister has asked me about it, and I said, her adventure creates adventure for me. So I'm trying to see it in a way that's more, it's going to get me into Arizona more often, and I'll travel and do things that are out of my box right now, which is great, because I haven't been to Arizona in a minute, and it's one of my favorite states. So I'm just seeing it as it's a really big positive, even though it took me a few months to kind of adjust to the idea. But once I got out of my mom head, I was like, no, she needs to go do her, and we'll see what happens and how it all works out.
Well, and I love this as we tie it into soul contracts. Here we have
Yes.
these soul family agreements of like, how do we show up as mothers? How do we show up in a supportive way to these like really big relationships in our life? And for me, it's like it's been really interesting of I have a very interesting relationship with my son because I'm more wild than he is. Like I'm more living life than he is. And I'm like, come on, Zach, like, let's go to this thing or let's have this experience. And he's like, no, mom, I'm trying to be responsible right now. And I'm like, come on, buddy, come play with me. But he's also like, I have a very unique relationship with him in the fact that, just the other day, he called me on his way home. It was probably like 10 p.m. And he's like, okay, mom, get our drinks ready, get the oven on. Like, I'm gonna come home, we're gonna dish. Like he came home and he literally chatted my ear off about every detail of his life for an hour and a half. And I'm like, I don't know what 18-year-old does this with his mom, but we hold each other with such an air of confidant and non-judgment that it's a very unique relationship. And I love that that's part of our soul agreement to have this acceptance of one another and
Yeah.
showing up for one another. And I'm like, okay, buddy, if you're gonna leave, he's leaving me. Like he's trying to leave the nest as soon as possible. Like he even told me the other day that he's planning on he's thinking about taking a few weeks off in May to start his internship early even though still has high school classes, he's like, I'm sure I can figure it out with my teachers to like be done early. And I'm like, oh my God, like the moment he leaves, he's never coming home. Like there's this knowingness. But I'm like, he will never be back in Montana. He's so over Montana. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, so he's gone, but I've already cultivated such a relationship that I'm like, it'll be okay. I'll be all right.
And he's going from one extreme to the other. So that's such a trip too, because he's going from the mountains and the snow to the desert and
Yes.
heat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it really does mark and it shows you how your soul contract with your son is showing up, the mother and the son relationship and how you guys are holding space for each other in your own growth, even though there's however many years between you, and you can look at each other as the humans that you are, even though you hold this really significant role in his life.
Yeah. Well, and the roles have been messy for a long time.
Hmm.
His father has been toxic, right? Like, and I've talked about this on the show many times about his father showing up in a very strong, narcissistic, emotionally abusive behavior. And as soon as my son became more and more an adult, he was able to see what the relationship was for what it was, and really learning how to advocate for his own boundaries and have this really crown chakra perspective of his relationship with his dad, of going, I know exactly why I have the father that I have, and I know exactly why I have the mother that I have, and I'm accepting of what gifts they brought me and the choice that I have with the relationship with each. And I'm like, what 18-year-old has that level of self-awareness to begin with? So I feel absolutely proud of him, and also like what a gift for him to move forward into his life of making choices, of recognizing his soul path of what his parents offered him, right?
Yeah.
Even though what he knows, his dad is emotionally abusive, he doesn't have any victimhood mentality out of it, right? And so he's like, I see the blessings that my father gave me by toughening me up and making sure that I don't make the same choices that he did, which is why he won't drink or do drugs or, all of these things, because he saw that that was part of his dad's path. His dad's a dry alcoholic, or a functional alcoholic, I should say. And so it's just really awesome to witness someone at that such a young age having that level of awareness and choice of, I'm not going to let my past rule and dictate my future.
Yeah, he's not over identifying with all of the experiences that he's had in his childhood. So
Yeah.
now he can take on life and take on his adulthood in a different perspective versus being the victim of mom and daddy issues. He's like, no, he's been able to heal through that with you and his journey as he's been getting older. And then at the same time, recognizing where his dad stands and holds that space for him too. So that's pretty darn amazing, actually.
Yeah. I'm like, good job.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm patting myself on the back over here.
Yeah, and it really does show when you can see the bigger picture in situations in our life, how it can alchemize and how it can show up, like how we can grow it through it versus it becoming something that we have to consistently heal through. We can see it for what it is in the moment and say, okay, I can move and shift through this, and it doesn't have to be this long, decade, 2 decade thing that we're having to heal through. And so that's just, I think kids are just coming in so different these days too, the awareness. And when you have conscious parents, it's
Right.
just a different experience all the way around.
Absolutely. I remember when I took him to one of my good friends and colleagues, and she's a past life regressionist, and really wanted to kind of help him see the idea of soul contracts from the past and what's bringing forward. And it was like a fundamental shift in his awareness from, I think he was probably 12 or somewhere between 12 and 14 when I brought him. And the past life regressionist was like, oh my gosh, you should be so proud of your parents. They haven't killed each other this lifetime. Like it was this, like they're actually functioning and not causing physical harm. Like we're making progress, like just in having that idea of that we've come from such contrast past lives, and then having Zach recognize his relationship with his father through past lives of why his father is so attached to him this lifetime is so based on the stories of the past lives so that he could recognize like, oh, well, yeah, if we weren't together and when we were Vikings, like one of us would have died. Like he had that recognition of all of his past stories and the past lives that brought him to his new soul agreements this lifetime of what he wanted to get out of this relationship. And um, when I met his father, it really was like the moment I saw him, I was like, oh, that's the father of my child. You know, like that awareness of not he's my soulmate, not I'm going to be with him forever, not instant love. It was, oh, that's the father of my child. And I could feel like this veil come over me to make sure I would come into union with this person so that the child would be a product of it. Right. Like, and in those certain instances. Right. And so I just find this topic so interesting and can be so validating to understand why our past is what it is and to bring us out of that victimhood mode of going, yeah, of course I chose that. Of course this child needed to be a product. Of course I needed to learn this lesson. Of course I needed to learn how to find my own independence and truth and work through it. And for me, a lot of it was having boundaries, right? Like that was my big life lesson that his father was the teacher of, right? And so I just love soul contracts because it makes sense to me. It makes everything make sense. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get that now.
I think there's a knowing to the remembering of, this, I was thinking about it this morning when I was kind of making some notes for this conversation. And I speak of it like I've done this deep dive of studying with it and everything. And when I really thought about it, I'm like, I really haven't, but it's when the concept came through is like this huge just download of remembering and knowing that it just impacted my soul on such a heavy level, like just such an extreme level that it broke through so many like barriers in my life. And that is literally when you know the truth is coming forward, is when it speaks to you on such a profound level, and then you can map it out and see it for what it is. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is what we're here to do. And so part of the things I was thinking about this morning is why there's like fear of change, right? Or why we hold on to so much of what has happened in the past is because we aren't seeing that bigger picture. And when sometimes we're so afraid of change or what can happen that we create a whole reality based off of that in our own thought patterns. And it's like, it's really not what it's about. We got to get out of that fear-based energy to take chance to say, hey, you know what? There's already things that we have put in place in action for our life, and just trust in the flow that what's coming forward is for our highest good. And when those things do come forward that are traumatic, they're difficult to go through, it gives you this sense of like standing in your warrior position and say, I can handle this because I've learned all of these techniques to be able to stand strong, to be able to face this. And when you learn about the archetypes, which is also a part of our soul contracts, because going through it, it's like you have our archetypes, we have our chakras, which are our emotional energy fields. That is how one of the things I really loved in it, it says our biography becomes our biology. And I was like, yes. So I wrote that down because it's so true. It's our story becomes our health. It becomes our illnesses and our disease. So we either are going to manifest good health because we're moving and shifting through our stories in a positive way, or we're going to shift through them in a negative way, and that causes disease and illness. And I was like, okay, there you go. So we have archetypes, we have chakras, we have our soul contracts, and with people in our life, and it's just it's layered upon layered upon layered. But when you see it and you're like, I get it, it all just kind of fits in. All the puzzle pieces fit in together.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
So
it.
I thought we could get onto some like part of the master class that's coming up in Moon Rising, is which starts on the 11th, March 11th, and I'm really excited about it, but is recognizing our mapping out our own soul contract. So I thought you and I can do that. We've been doing that a little bit right now, but I want to kind of start it off and recognize, like, even through some of the most difficult aspects of our life, you can see it when you look back, you can see how it has impacted our life to grow us and to build us and to help us go where we're going, right? Who we're becoming. And so, as a child, and I've talked about this, my dad was in an accident when I was 4, and he died, and my mom was 22. I was 4, my brother was 3, and my mom was 8 months pregnant with my sister, right? But my dad, who raised us, stepped right in, like right in, and raised us as if we were his own, and never looked back as if we were stepchildren or thought of us anything less than, right? And we never looked at our dad as anything less than our dad. So we were like, we always had our real dad, and then we had our dad that raised us and loved us like he was. And as an adult, I look back and I'm like, wow, my dad, he took on a grieving mother and 3 grieving children and loved us in such a deep, profound way that even 15 years later, then they had my youngest sister. And see, when you look at it, it's like my dad and my parents. So on a much bigger, okay, human experience, tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy. But on a soul level, if you look at us coming together to discuss what we're going to go through, right? We came to this agreement that my dad was going to come in, us 3 kids were going to be the product of the relationship of my parents, right? And then through his departure, his transition, my dad was now going to come in to raise us and have his imprint on us. And then my sister would come in later, which could have never happened if my dad would have stayed. You know what I'm saying? So it's like when you have that big picture, so what is it that I learned from that? One is resilience. One is being able to look at death and handle death and be able to move through the process of grief, but then to be strong, right? And so there was a lot of things I had to learn through that process. But when you can point it out, it's like, wow, that's just so profound. And we can find the blessings within the traumas of it.
Well, and it also, I'm curious for you and your learnings, was it also allowing love to come in a radical way, even in the midst of something that's heavy?
Yeah, being able to accept somebody else coming in and saying, okay, you're now my dad. Yeah, absolutely. Accepting others that in our life. And then even when you were talking about your son's dad, I had that because how old were you? So I was 16 when I got pregnant with my first son.
I was 24 when I had my son, so
Yeah.
I probably was married off. I was married off is what I kind of felt like. I was married when I was 22 and had only been with him like a year prior.
Okay.
It was still young, like compared,
Yeah.
like we were young when we had our first babies.
Yeah. And then it's like the knowing of, like when I met my son's dad, I didn't feel like, oh, you're mine forever. No, it was like literally, you are the father of my child that's coming. And I just knew it. I just
Yeah.
knew it. And then when I had him, I was done with that relationship. It was like I got what I needed from the relationship. I learned so much from him in, the leaving and the relationship of itself. And then in the end, I have my son, and that he has been my oldest son has been my biggest lesson. And he's the one who made me step up and be a mom.
Mhm.
Right. So it was like all these things that happen in our life. And when we look at it, it's like, oh shit, how the heck did I get through all that? But it's because it's part of the contract in which we're here to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like for mine, it was like, okay, I had my son at 24. I left his dad by the time I was 26, and the lesson wasn't over. Like I learned how to create those physical boundaries of like, I'm no longer available to have you physically in my life. Like I don't want to be in your presence. To now I need to learn how to have emotional boundaries. Now I need to learn how to have psychic boundaries. Now I need to learn how to put all these things in place so that I'm not under emotional attack. And overall, like that custody battle lasted about 10 years. And so the lesson afterwards was even longer. Like the emotional abuse that was occurring during the marriage was significant. I had lost a lot of weight. I mean, people have told me I was just a doormat. And I had no level of self-esteem, no level of self-confidence, no level of standing up for myself. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, like that is not my story at all anymore, right? Like I've radically shifted mindsets. And it took not just the relationship, but the 10 years custody battle afterwards to get to the point of I no longer give any fucks. I no longer like if it there's a level of having to surrender in the process and giving the power when he was older, like giving the power to my son of like, this is who your dad is. The court says that you can't have to have a poor parent and there's nothing I can do to protect you. And so now it's your job to learn how to protect yourself. And this is your journey, your story. And so it became a transition of me in mama bear mode of always trying to protect him, always trying to make sure all of his needs were met to I can't control this. This is literally the father that you chose to come in with. And I can't change that. Like no matter what no matter what I do, I cannot change the fact that you chose your parents. And once I made that recognition, things began to shift because I wasn't energetically attached to a role that I was trying to fit into that wasn't working. I was just making myself incredibly sick. And so there was that transition of like, okay, I can have all these boundaries in place. I can accept the fate for which it was dealt because it was my choice. It was our choice. It was my son's choice. It was my ex's choice. And how can we move forward? And once I let go of that level of control, everything shifted. Like the level of attack energetically and emotionally from my ex just stopped because I stopped caring. I was like, whatever, man. Like you're not going to phase me. If he couldn't hook me in, then there was nothing there to trigger, right? And so once the trigger was gone, he stopped. He stopped, and I'm like, wow, what a lesson just in that. And then how do I want to continue my healing process so I could help others in the world heal from the same type of that empath meets narcissist, consistent relationships that happen in our reality. Like there's a reason why these two consistently come together because it is a dynamic of the greatest lessons that you can possibly learn in a relationship is the empath needs to learn how to have energetic boundaries and how to have boundaries and stand up for themselves and be an independent individual. And then the narcissist, their job, like I always say, like my ex knows is so committed to his soul agreement. like he's so committed to this. I'm going to offer lessons everywhere I go, and everyone needs to have boundaries with him. And so it's just so interesting to kind of be like, yeah, he's doing great. Like he's doing fantastic in the role that he chose to come into.
Yeah, and I find that interesting because one thing is I think it releases a level of judgment when we see like you are doing your job so fantastic that I can't even judge it because we don't know what we're here to do, right? We don't know everyone's contract. But what I do really love about this is that we get to go within ourselves and we can map them out and see them for how they are without having to go and have somebody tell us what they are. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, it's coming back to our own self and sourcing our information. So, yes, you having like the narcissist coming in and you and the empath and the child coming forward and the archetypes of all of that, it's
Right.
just like bam, 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 right there, right? And so for mine, it's like really just seeing how each role has played out. Like my mother-daughter relationship has been a huge impact, right? And it's like I've learned from her in so many profound ways that I almost do the opposite of everything my mom does and not like so much intentionally, but it's just in my personality. If she's reacted this way in something, I do the opposite, and that works really, really well for me. So it's like she is the mirror for me and how I need to walk. And so I've learned how to not be triggered by things, comments she makes or actions that she has, because it doesn't flow for me in my life. So I see it, it's a mirror, I give thanks to it, and now I can go and try to be as untriggerable as possible. And when we're really there and we're like, no, I'm not going to be triggered by that, that is the healing and on such a profound way. And so a lot of this is where's your personal power? Right? It's really tuning into our personal power and saying nobody can take it from me. we have to give away our power. It's not something that can be taken from us unless we allow that to happen. And that's when you stand in your sovereignty, and that's when you stand in your true authentic self of your power. And no, this is mine. And energetically, I'm setting all of my boundaries, but I recognize where everyone is and how everyone is playing a role in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that this is where Caroline Myss with her Soul Contracts books, where it really comes together with these different archetypes of where are we standing in which archetype and what area of life is that in. And the whole thing just gets really curious for me. And I think that I love that word. Like I love getting curious about this stuff because the more self-awareness that we have, the more we can step out of the victimhood role. Like I can see that where the saboteur shows up. I can see where my victim shows up. I can see where my prostitute shows up. And those are some of those archetypes that we all possess. We all have those identities, and which area of life do they show up in? So when, like, for example, my prostitute is in my house of marriage, like it is in my like romantic relationships, and I'm like, wow, that is so fucked up. Like I can see that, like I can have this awareness of like I can see where that has gone awry in the past, and how do I choose to recognize that this is a archetype that I want to transmute. I want to help her alchemize into the lover, into the priestess, if you will, of going, I can see my relationships of like, here's I'm of transactional, right? Like I'll do this for you if you do this for me. Like that transactional, like that is what the prostitute boils down to. And when I can go, I'm intentionally choosing not to have that behavior in my romantic partnership, and we're going to give it the light of what that is and how it has been an issue in my past, of going, well, how do I want to move forward? What would the lover do? What would the priestess do in this situation? And how can I embody those archetypes and say I'm no longer available to have a transactional relationship? Right. And so this is where it can get fun, where it's like you're challenging yourself to be the grandest version of who you are. Because if we're in that mode, we're literally going, all right, soul contract, I see you, I see what you're up to, and I'm going to become the most vibrant version of who I am, the most expansive version of who I am. No longer am I going to play victim to the roles that I was given, and I can transmute them into their highest qualities.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is the game of it, right? That's the game of life. When it all
Right.
boils down to it, is that we're here trying to figure out why we're here and what our purpose is. And through that, we have our soul guides that come in and these archetypes that say, hey, I'm going to create a scenario for you to alchemize your highest version. And how are you going to show up in that? And say, yes, the victim coming through, the saboteur, the prostitute, all of it. And when you can stand in as the priestess, as the warrior, as your divine feminine, right? Your masculine, all of it, you are alchemizing yourself and you're really taking on this strong role of life and just saying, I can get through this. And your purpose and mission starts showing up for you because it's like you start to see all of the patterns, connecting the dots, and you're pulling back those fragments of your life experiences that is helping you to grow and heal your heart and heal your mind and all of the emotions and everything. And it's really seeing this from that profound point of view instead of staying in that small constrictive energy of the victim and thinking everything is attacking me and nothing is in my favor and I'm just sick and I'm this and I'm that. And it's like, no, speak to yourself in such a loving way that your body has to stand up and heal, that your body has to show up in this really profound way to where if you eat something that is not for your highest health good, that your body's going to reject it, that it's going to say no. And you're going to be smart enough to listen and be aware enough to say, that is not for my highest good, and I can't be eating that stuff or drinking that or hanging out with toxic people or just whatever it is. But we're seeing these patterns in our life which show up because of the soul contracts that we have, because of the archetypes that we're working with. And it's such a profound and beautiful way of seeing everything. Like I just see it with such an open perspective that literally it's like, oh, I see, there you are, there you are. It's like boom, boom, boom. And it's okay. It's not about judgment and it's not over analyzing and it's not being stuck in my head. It's being like, having such profound awareness, you see why people show up in your life. And you see how your personal like patterns will make that happen. We manifest it, right? Frequency matches frequency. So if we're stuck in that victim, we're going to create victim mentality, victim situations and scenarios to show us like wake up. And that's what it is. It's all about like that awakening of leveling ourselves up to it.
Right. And I think that that's a really good point on how we are broken out of this level of self-judgment when we can come to our soul agreements, our soul contracts, and going, no, I signed up for this. I'm taking full radical responsibility for the position that I'm in, and now have a choice. And I think that's, I always say like the first step of healing is awareness. And so when we come into the awareness of our soul agreement, when our soul contract, what our archetypes are, what we embody easily, and going, is this to my benefit? How can I utilize this position to my benefit? What is and your whole body. This is what I really recognize. Like I remember even just 5 years ago and having such poor posture. Like my shoulders were concave, I was protecting my heart space constantly, like making myself physically small, right? And then I've noticed over this last bit of time frame where it's like when I sit, I am sitting with my shoulders back. I'm sitting with a straight spine. And that was after years and years of hunched overness, right? And then your body starts to recognize the energy. Like it used to be exhausting to sit in a straight back chair or to have my shoulders back. Like it was hard for my body to do it. And it took years to help it transition into proper posture. Right. And so now I feel like I can stand up tall, I can speak my truth, like all of these things become available because your body is responding to the knowingness of your empowerment, right? Like when we step out of victimhood, like, and so, sometimes there's this fear that I'm going to be intimidating when it's not intimidating, they're intimidated, right?
Mhm.
Like my power is what it is. And so when we can recognize our sisters and brothers who are also in their empowerment, like what a different dynamic of conversations that we have. Like we are talking about goals, we're talking about being motivated, we're talking about our self-awareness, we're talking about our health relationships. And when we come in contact with people who are not on their healing journey and they're intimidated by my presence, they're intimidated by my fullness of who I am, and to then meet people who are accepting and loving of, wow, she's in her power. I want to hang out with those types of people. I'm like, then you're starting to meet your new tribe, right? And like there's a transitionary time in all of that. And I just love witnessing people shift and have that awareness. I think that's why I love teaching so much. I love being a mentor. I love doing coaching because I can see people shift into that radical self-responsibility of going, like if my desk is a mess, guess who messed it up? It was me. If my kitchen is a disaster, guess what? That was me. If I chose this relationship and engaged in it in such a way, that was me. Like I did that. I chose that. And to go, I deserve better. I am a vibration of love, and therefore I deserve more than what this has to offer. And you're going to start to shift out of those types of relationships and into relationships that then reflect your level of self-love. Right. And so I love how all of it like intertwines with the soul agreements and contracts and archetypes. And like as we shift and move into understanding that oftentimes it feels like we are playing a game, like we signed up for it. Like we're in the game, we set up the pieces, we chose the roles, and now we get to go, okay, this is my fucking life. I've got the magic wand. Here's my shamanic perspective. If this is a dream and I'm the key role player in it, how do I want the pieces to move forward in self-awareness of all of these different people, characters that are showing up in my life?
Yeah. And I loved the examples that you're giving. Like, if my desk is a mess or whatever, it's like we can take accountability for the messes that we make within our home. But when it's accountability to our behavior, we're like, nope, nope, it's everyone else. And that is just like, no, it's the same thing. If you are creating issues in your life based off of your behavior, based off of your past, look at it, be accountable to it, and shift that. And so, it's really tuning into the symbology of it. And that's what's so powerful too, is when you can see the symbology of all the things showing up, like you're talking about having your back straight, right? Your body responding to your thoughts, your body responding to your positive behavior. So of course you're going to sit up straight because you're feeling empowered, And when is it that we don't feel empowered? Then suddenly it's like, oh, the hip wants to act up, this wants to act up. The body is responding to our thoughts, our emotions, our energy. And so it's like, nope, I am going to sit tall. I'm going to stand in my power. And literally your body responds to it. And everything else is in flow with that because you're connecting it. And it is like, we're creating this game and we are playing it. And so how are all the roles going to show up? And how are you going to continue to show up in your truth? And when you do that, it's just like, yeah, it's impacting every single aspect of your life.
Yeah, I love it. So
Mhm.
as you guys may know, like I have such explicit trust for Isabel and Chantel and like their roles and Moon Rising. And I don't know the details of your masterclass coming up. I just know that like you're a rock star when it comes to teaching this topic. And I'm like, what's up? What are you doing? What are you teaching? I want to know all the details.
Okay, so the Soul Contract Masterclass, it is a 4-week class, and so we're going to be meeting on Tuesdays, 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, so 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And basically, this is going to just be like, I'm going to have my part that I'm going to teach. I really want to deep dive into this, but I want to have open conversations with the students and I want them to come forward and be able to map out their own soul contracts. I want them to see them for themselves and be able to heal through that because it's nice when somebody can say, hey, look it, this is it. And there is absolutely purpose for that, to have somebody help you to know what your contracts are and everything. But when you can see it in yourself, how powerful is that? And so we're going to tune into like waking up to unity consciousness, which I love that concept. The alchemy of your soul. What are soul contracts and our soul families? So we're going to deep dive into that and how our soul family is here and how they support us and how they don't support us and why that is happening as well. Empowering yourself through your soul contracts. We're going to get into the archetypes and the guides, and we're going to map out your soul contracts, and we're going to learn about the chakras and the biography of it and how it becomes our biology. And so, just taking all of these concepts, because, like I said, it's layers upon layers, but it's going to be an exciting conversation for 4 weeks to learn about all of this and how you can see it and open up the perspective to these soul contracts and have that big crown chakra soul point of view and bring it and earth it, ground it into our life.
I love it. I love that the piece of you're mapping it out. Like
Mhm.
really starting to see the different soul family positions of like why your father showed up the way they did. Why did your mother show up the way they did? How did that impact your growth and development, these guardians in our life, as well as our children, and what's our impact for them? What are they trying to learn? And I think it's really cool also to go the stepfathers or the best friends or the people who weren't born into your soul agreement, right? Like, and
Yeah.
how they show up can be so eye-opening. Like, it just reminds me of the time when my son was like 3 years old and all he could talk about was his past lives. And he would look at my his stepdad and was just like, why can't you remember we were there together, like we were on the planet together. And just to go, wow, like you can't make that shit up of the soul agreements are not just our bloodlines, that it's so much more than that, and why certain people come into your life for a brief moment to help remind you back into what was the lessons and learnings and the different dynamics. And I love that, like, you're gonna play with the archetypes and the guides and all of those pieces. I'm like, I kind of want to go to class.
Come on in, pop on in.
Right?
Yeah, and it just keeps going, So my husband now, he's not the father of my children, right? But my granddaughter and my daughter are so they represent him, like they are so much like him. And we always joke around, like, how are they not like he says, it was kind of funny, but kind of dirty. But he was like, how did my sperm get into your ex guy to have my kids kind of thing, And I'm like, that's just funny because my granddaughter and him have such a like deep connection that I'm like, how is it possible? And the way she is with music and dancing, and that's all him, right? And that doesn't come from my ex-husband doesn't come from that. And so I see those soul contracts from the moment they like laid eyes on each other. It was just this instant connection. And I'm talking at 2 days old, And so it just is so profound. And so mapping them out, seeing them for what they are, and having this as a big part of your toolbox moving forward in life, it just makes everything so much easier.
I love it. I love it. So
Yeah.
if you guys are interested in signing up, know that we're now open for enrollment. It's 288 for 4 weeks class. And I think what I'm hearing is there's going to be a lot of spiritual coaching going on to really support you in having these aha moments. So if you have the self-awareness that is going to come from this class, you're going to be shifting out of that victimhood mode and into your fullness, into your power, into your ability to say yes to life more fully and in a more impactful way for those in your world. And so I'm really excited that this is happening. And I love that we're going to be offering more master classes like this one in the future. So I'm super excited. Yay.
Yeah. And you know too that shamanism is going to be in it. Reiki is going to be in it, right? It's not just, yes, it's focused on soul contracts, but it's all of it that is so encompassing. So it's definitely like just come forward and give yourself this opportunity to learn and be in a group of people that are all like-minded and heart-minded and soul-based and all of it.
I love it. So be sure to check that out. It will be in our show notes. And then until next time, may you awaken to the whispers of wisdom rising from within.